Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bible Summary Series. Today we're starting in Judges chapter 7. Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, gathered his men together and set up camp beside the spring of Herod. From where they stood, the vast Midianite army lay to the north, spread across the valley near the hill of Moreh. But the Lord spoke to Gideon and said, "You have too many men with you for me to give Midian into your hands. Otherwise, Israel will boast against me and say, 'We saved ourselves by our own strength.'" So God told Gideon, "Go, announce to this people, 'Whoever is fearful and afraid, you may leave and return home now from Mount Gilead.'" And when Gideon gave that announcement, 22,000 men turned back and went home. Only 10,000 stayed. But the Lord said again, "The people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. The ones I choose will go with you, and the ones I do not choose will not go." So Gideon brought the men down to the water, and the Lord said, "Set aside every man who laps the water with his tongue like a dog, and also every man who kneels down to drink." When they counted, only 300 men drank by scooping water up with their hands to their mouths. All the rest knelt down, and the Lord said, "With these 300 who drank from their hands, I will save you and deliver the Midianites into your hand. Let everyone else go home." So Gideon sent the rest of Israel back to their tents, but he kept the 300 men. Then they gathered provisions and picked up trumpets, while the enormous Midianite army waited below in the valley. That very night the Lord spoke again. "Arise, go down to the Midianite camp, for I have delivered it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go alone, take your servant Phurah with you, and go listen to what the enemy will say, and afterward your hands will be strengthened to go down against the camp." So Gideon went down with Phurah to the very edge of the enemy lines, right where the army guard stood. Below them, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the people of the east were spread across the valley like a swarm of grasshoppers, too many to count. Their camels were like grains of sand on the seashore, without number. As Gideon approached, he overheard one man telling his fellow soldier about a dream. He said, "Listen, I had a dream. I saw a loaf of barley come rolling into the camp of Midian. It came to the tent and hit it so hard that the tent turned upside down and collapsed." And the other man responded, "This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for into his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host." When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he immediately bowed in worship. Then he ran back to his own camp and shouted, "Get up! The Lord has delivered the Midianite army into your hands." Then he divided his 300 men into 3 groups. He gave each man a trumpet and an empty clay pitcher with a torch hidden inside it. Then he told them, "Watch me and do what I do. When I reach the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I blow my trumpet, you will blow yours as well, all around the camp, and shout, 'The sword of the Lord and of Gideon.'" So Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after the guards had been changed. Suddenly they blew their trumpets and smashed the pitchers in their hands. All 3 companies blew their trumpets loudly, broke the pitchers, and held the blazing torches high in their left hands, with the trumpets in their right. And together they cried out, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" They stood surrounding the camp, and confusion exploded among the Midianites. The entire army ran and cried and tried to escape. As the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the Midianites to turn their swords on each other throughout the entire camp. And the army fled towards Bethshittah as far as Zererath, near the border of Abel Meholath, all the way to Tabbath. And the men of Israel gathered together out of Naphtali, Asher, and out of all Manasseh, and pursued after the Midianites. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down and cut off the Midianites by the river. Take the waters of Bethbara and the Jordan before they escape." So the men of Ephraim gathered and secured the river crossings. They captured the two Midianite princes, Oreb and Zeb, and they killed Oreb upon the rock Oreb that later bore his name, and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. Then they continued chasing Midian, and finally brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the far side of the Jordan River. In Judges chapter 8, when the battle against Midian was over, the men of Ephraim came storming up to Gideon, furious. "Why did you treat us like this?" they demanded. "Why didn't you call us when you went out to fight against Midian?" They argued with him sharply. But Gideon answered and said, "What have I done compared to you? Aren't the leftover grapes of Ephraim better than the whole harvest of Abiezer? God has delivered the Midianite princes, Oreb and Zeb, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to that?" And with his words, their anger faded. Meanwhile, Gideon and his 300 men crossed the Jordan River. They were exhausted, yet they still pushed forward in pursuit of the last two Midianite kings. When they reached the city of Succoth, Gideon said to the leaders there, "Please, give some bread to my men. They're exhausted, and we are still chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the princes of Succoth said, "Do you already have Zebah and Zalmunna in your hands, that we should give bread to your army?" Gideon said, "Fine. When the Lord hands Zebah and Zalmunna over to me, I will come back and tear your flesh with thorns and briars of the wilderness." Then he went to the next town, Penuel, and asked the men there for the same thing. But they answered him just like the men of Succoth. So Gideon said to the men of Penuel, "When I return safely, I will tear down this tower of yours." At this point, Zebah and Zalmunna were far to the east in a place called Karkor, with about 15,000 men. These were all that remained of their entire army. 120,000 of their fighting men had already fallen. So Gideon took a route used by nomads near Nobah and Jogbehah and came upon the remaining Midianite army when they felt completely safe. Zebah and Zalmunna tried to flee, but Gideon chased them down, captured both kings, and completely routed the rest of their army. Before the sun was even up the next morning, Gideon, son of Joash, was already returning from the battle. On his way back, he captured a young man from Succoth and questioned him. The young man wrote down for Gideon all the names of the city's rulers, 77 elders in total. With their names in hand, Gideon marched into Succoth and said, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, the very men you mocked me about. Remember when you said, 'Do you already have them in your hands, that we should give bread to your weary men?'" Then Gideon took the elders of the city, gathered thorns and briars from the wilderness, and used them to teach the men of Succoth. After that, he went to Penuel, tore down the city's tower, just as he said, and struck down all the men of the city. Then Gideon turned to the captured kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, and asked, "What kind of men were the ones you killed at Tabor?" They answered, "They look like you, each one like the son of a king." And Gideon said, "Those men were my brothers, even the sons of my mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you." Then Gideon turned to his oldest son, Jether, and said, "Up and slay them." But Jether did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, since he was still a youth. So Zebah and Zalmunna said, "You rise and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength." So Gideon stepped forward and slayed them both. Then he took the ornaments, beautiful crescent-shaped pieces of gold that hung on their camels' necks. After all this, the Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson after you, for you have delivered us from Midian." But Gideon said, "I will not rule over you, and neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." However, Gideon said to them, "I have one request of you, that each of you give me the earrings you took as plunder." The Midianites wore gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites, and the people said, We will gladly give them. So they spread out a garment, and every man threw in the gold earrings from his share of the plunder. The total weight of the gold earrings alone came to 1,700 shekels of gold, not counting the ornaments, the pendants, the purple robes worn by the Midianite kings, or the chains from the camels' necks. Gideon took all of this and made an ephod and placed it in his hometown of Ophrah. But Israel began to treat it like an idol. They went there to worship it, and it became a trap, a snare for Gideon and his family. Still, Midian was subdued before Israel, and the nation enjoyed 40 years of peace during Gideon's lifetime. Gideon, also known as Jerubbaal, son of Joash, returned to his home. And Gideon had 70 sons, for he had many wives. He also had a concubine in Shechem, who bore him another son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon died at a good old age and was buried in Ophrah in the tomb of his father Joash. But as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites turned away again. They started worshiping Baal and made Baal-berith their god. They did not remember the Lord, who had rescued them from all their enemies on every side, nor did they show any kindness to the family of Jerubbaal, Gideon, despite all the good he had done for Israel.
Yeah, oh, yo, 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 lo, yo, yo. Yeah, oh, yo, yo, yo. Early in the morning, Gideon rose by the spring of Herod. The army stood.
Midian lay like a sea billow, spread through the valley near the hill of Moreh. But the Lord said,
You have too many men, lest Israel boast and forget again.
Tell the fearful they may turn and go.
And 22,000 went back home. Still the Lord said, There are too many yet. Bring them down to the water, I will test.
Some knelt to drink, some watched with care. Only 300 lifted water by hand. And the Lord said, With these 300 men, I will save you and deliver them. Not by strength, not by might, but by the power of the Lord who fights. When his people trust his hand, he delivers all the land. Not by numbers, not by sword, but by the promise of the Lord. Lift your voice and understand, the victory is in his hand. The victory is in his hand.
Oh, that very night the Lord spoke clear.
Go down to the camp, do not fear.
If you're afraid, take fire out with you.
Listen close to what they'll do.
Gideon heard a Midianite say, I dreamed of bread that rolled our way. It struck the tent and it fell flat. They said, This is Gideon, God's sword at that.
Gideon bowed and worshipped, then ran back to the 300 men.
Rise up now,
The Lord has said,
Midian is delivered, not by strength, not by might, but by the power of the Lord who fights. When his people trust his hand, he delivers all the land. Not by numbers, not by sword, but by the promise of the Lord. Lift your voice and understand,
the victory is in his hand. The victory is in his hand.
oh, with trumpets, jars, and fire inside, they stood at the camp on every side. They blew the horns, the jars were broken, and the camp fell into fear and confusion. The sword of the Lord and Gideon, they cried as the enemy turned on their own. Midian fled in the dark of night, and the Lord won Israel's fight. Not by strength, not by might, but by the power of the Lord who fights. When his people trust his hand, he delivers all the land. Oreb fell on Oreb's a rock. Zeb at the winepress justice struck. The land had rest, the war was done. God had delivered everyone. They said, Rule over us, you and your son.
But Gideon said, The Lord alone.
Yet gold was gathered, an ephod made, and once again their hearts were swayed. Not by strength, not by might, but by the power of the Lord who fights. So don't forget what he has done. He is faithful, he is one. Not by idols, gold or name. Don't turn back the way they came. Lift your voice and understand,
The victory is in his hand. The victory is in his hand.
But when Gideon died, they turned away, forgot the Lord who saved their day.
day, so hear this song and understand. Don't forget the Lord who saved your land.